Hello and welcome to our continuing series of devotionals, A Road Trip Through the Bible. I am Tom Larkin and I preach for the Union Church of Christ in Summerville, Alabama. It is my prayer that this series of devotionals is helpful to you. It is my pleasure this week to be with you as our road trip takes us to a most solemn place in Bible history, the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane is probably best known from the time of Jesus. It was located on the east side of the Kidron Valley, across from the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem, and it was set at the foot of the Mount of Olives. The garden itself was a place where, according to John 18 and verse number 2, Jesus went often with his disciples. Of course, it is probably best known to us as the place where Jesus prayed on the night of his betrayal, a prayer in which he poured out his heart unto the Father. He prayed in part, "If it be possible, let this cup pass from me." In fact, a prayer that he repeated 3 times, and ultimately a prayer that the Father could not grant, because your salvation and mine depended upon Jesus drinking from that cup of sorrow that was connected with the cross. Because of the events of that night, we probably view the Garden of Gethsemane as a place of sorrow, and indeed it is. As Matthew records the events of that night as Jesus entered the garden to pray, Matthew says this, "And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me." The words used here, sorrowful, very heavy, exceeding sorrowful, even unto death, paint for us a vivid picture of one who is encompassed with sorrow. It's a picture of one who's almost overwhelmed with grief. Truly, our Lord struggled in the garden that night. As Luke records for us in the 22nd chapter of his gospel, Jesus has already prayed that prayer once. God had sent an angel to strengthen him. And following that, Luke records these words, "And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was, as it were, great drops of blood falling down to the ground." As we read this inspired account, you can almost feel the intensity of his anticipation of the death on the cross. Truly a place of sorrow. But although Gethsemane is a place bathed in sorrow, we should also recognize that it is a place where the faithfulness of God and his love for man is on display. For in Gethsemane, we see one of the greatest exhibitions of divine love on display. There, the Son of God, in full recognition of the horrors of the cross, prayed not only, "Let this cup pass," but also, "Not my will, but thine be done." Hundreds of years earlier, the prophet Isaiah spoke with amazing clarity of the suffering that Jesus would endure as he gave himself as an offering for sin. In Isaiah 53, beginning at verse number 3, the prophet wrote, "He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs, and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all." Jesus was well aware what awaited him at the cross. It is what prompted this prayer. But here in Gethsemane, he sealed his decision to drink of that cup of sorrow, to be the sacrifice that you and I needed. Jesus entered the garden that night in a spiritual struggle, but he left the garden that night with a strength that took him to the cross, and in fact through the cross to the joy of his Father. I encourage you to join us again next week as we continue to examine the Garden of Gethsemane in our series, A Road Trip Through the Bible. In that study, we will examine Jesus' submission to the will of God and what it ought to mean to us. We'd love to have you visit with us at Union. The time of our services will appear on the screen at the end of this presentation. And until we see you, or until our next devotional study, I hope you have a blessed day.